I broke into the most dangerous man's estate in Oakhaven to steal the one thing that could save my brother. They called him the Clockwork Wraith, a man who hadn't aged in a century, a monster who traded blood for miracles. I thought I could take what I needed and disappear before he even knew I was there. I didn't expect him to be waiting for me. And I definitely didn't expect the deal he offered. 30 days. My blood. For his cure. You're listening to Venom and Velvet. The iron gates of the Blackwood Estate didn't groan. They hissed. A sound like a long-held secret finally escaping into the freezing fog of the Oakhaven district. I stood there for a breathless moment, my fingers numb against the cold, notched metal of my lockpicks. Behind me, the great chimney of the city churned, vomiting thick, greasy soot in a sky that hadn't seen a true star in 3 generations. Somewhere in a cramped, dafty room 3 miles into the slums, my brother Leo was coughing his soul into a tattered silk handkerchief. Every wet, rattling breath he took was a second ticking off a clock I could not stop. Until tonight. I slipped through the gap in the gates, my boots silent on the overgrown stone path. The manor loomed ahead, a jagged silhouette of Victorian Gothicism and industrial ambition. It was the home of Count Viktor, the figure the charcoal sellers called the Clockwork Wraith. They said he traded his pulse for an extra century in a laboratory full of miracles. In the taverns, they spoke of him as a ghost in a machine, a man who had forgotten the taste of sun and the warmth of human skin, preferring the cold embrace of brass and mercury. I didn't care about his soul. I only cared about the sanguine elixir. The side door to the conservatory gave way with a soft, mechanical click that made my heart leap into my throat. I stepped inside, and the world changed instantly. The air here didn't taste of coal, smoke, and desperation. It tasted of expensive pipe tobacco, cedar wood, and the sharp, metallic tang of lightning caught in a jar. I moved through the foyer, my hand trailing along walls lined with silk wallpaper, the color of a bruised plum. The house felt alive. I could hear it, a low, rhythmic thrumming vibrating through the floorboards, like the heartbeat of a great brass beast hidden beneath. I followed that pulse toward the east wing, my breath coming in shallow, jagged hitches that hurt my chest. The laboratory was a cathedral of industry and obsession. Huge, blown glass vats filled with iridescent cerulean liquid lined the walls, casting long, flickering shadows that danced like ghosts against the vaulted ceiling. In the center of the room sat a massive workbench of scarred oak. It was littered with skeletal brass hands dissected pocket watches, and crystal vials that shimmered with a faint, internal gold. My hands shook as I reached for the mahogany cabinet at the end of the bench. The wood was etched with the sigil of a weeping sun, the mark of the elixir. Third drawer from the left is rigged with a spring-loaded needle, little thief. It's coated in a neurotoxin that would have you paralyzed before you could even realize you'd failed to breathe. The voice didn't come from the shadows. It seemed to rise from the very stones of the manor. It was a low, resonant rumble. Dark silk dragged over gravel. I froze. My fingers were an inch from the brass handle. I turned slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a bird frantic to escape its cage. Standing by a high, arched window was the master of the house. Count Viktor was exactly the pillar of refined, muscular strength the rumor suggested. He stood nearly a head taller than me, his frame lean and corded with the kind of muscle that comes from manual labor, not just the hunt. He wore charcoal grey trousers that hugged the long, powerful lines of his legs, tucked into high, polished riding boots. His white linen shirt was open at the throat. The sleeves rolled up to his elbows to reveal forearms stained with graphite and ancient, alchemical ink. A heavy leather welder's apron was buckled over his chest, cinched at the waist by a broad belt that carried a row of specialized tools. His hair was cropped short, a chaotic tumble of raven locks that shadowed a face of devastating, severe beauty. He looked like a man who had forged himself out of iron and silence. He wasn't holding a weapon. He was holding a tiny, delicate gear and a jeweler's loop. I wasn't going to, I started, the lie dying in my throat as he stepped into the pool of light cast by the flickering gas lamp. You were, he interrupted. His eyes weren't human. They were the color of aged whiskey, glowing with a predatory amber light that seemed to pin me to the spot. You are Mina Vance. Your father gambled away your inheritance in the dens of the Low District. And now you've come to steal from a monster, to save a ghost. He moved then. It wasn't a walk. It was a displacement of air. One moment he was across the room. The next, he was looming over me. The scent of him hit me like a physical blow. Sandalwood, cedar, and something ancient and cold. He reached out, his fingers, long, elegant, and calloused, lifting my chin. The touch was electric. His skin was cool, but the intensity in his gaze was a scorching heat that made my knees feel like water. I could train you here and leave your body for the rats, he murmured, his thumb brushing my lower lip. The movement was deceptively tender, a stark contrast to the flash of fangs that caught the lamplight as he spoke. Or I can make you an offer. I am a man of many talents, Mina, but my work is reaching a stage where I require a steady hand for the titrations. My last assistant lacked the constitution for my lifestyle.
And what is the price?
I whispered, my voice trembling. Viktor leaned in, his nose brushing the stray hairs at my temple. I felt the heat of his breath, the only warm thing about him, as he spoke directly into my ear. 30 days, he said, his voice dropping to a seductive, commanding growl. You will stay here. You will tend the fires. You will scribe my formulas. And you will give me what I require when the hunger becomes a distraction. And in return, I will send the elixir to your brother tonight. A life for a life. A debt of blood and time. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eye. In those amber depths, I didn't see a monster. I saw a lonely sovereign in a kingdom of gears, looking for something he couldn't build with brass and mercury. I swallowed hard, my pulse thrumming against his thumb. I accept. The first week was a study in agonizing, quiet proximity. Viktor had kept his word with terrifying efficiency. Within an hour of our bargain, one of his mechanical couriers, a brass bird with a clockwork heart, had vanished into the fog, carrying the gold-hued vial to my mother. A return message had arrived the next morning. Leo was breathing. The fever had broken, and so the debt was sealed. But the manor was a strange cage. For the first few days, Viktor barely spoke to me outside of necessary instructions. He was a creature of the night, emerging from his private quarters only when the sun had fully surrendered to the smoke. My tasks were simple but intimate. I had to clean his drafting tools, polish the brass fittings of the massive vats, and sit at a small desk in the corner of the lab to transcribe his frantic, jagged notes into a leather-bound ledger. I spent those nights watching him. He moved with a predatory grace that never quite settled into stillness. He would stand for hours over a blueprint, his brow furrowed, his large, ink-stained hands resting on the table. Occasionally, he would discard his leather apron, revealing the way his linen shirt clung to the broad span of his shoulders. I found my eyes wandering to the pulse at his throat, or the way his raven hair caught the orange glow of the furnace. He was a man of immense physical presence, and yet he seemed to move through the house like he was trying not to disturb the air. By the fifth night, The silence between us has begun to thrum with a different kind of energy. "Mina," he said, not looking up from a microscopic ear he was filling. "The mercury in the secondary vat is running low. Fetch the canisters from the cellar." The cellar was cold, smelling of damp stone and earth. When I returned, struggling with the heavy leaden canisters, I found him waiting at the top of the stairs. He didn't wait for me to reach him. He descended 3 steps and took the weight from my arms with a single, effortless motion. Our fingers brushed, just for a second, and the coldness of his skin sent a jolt through me that felt like a physical strike. He didn't pull away immediately. He looked down at me with his amber eyes searching my face in the dim stairwell. "You shouldn't exert yourself so," he murmured, his voice a low vibration that seemed to echo in my bones. "It's my job, Count," I replied, my voice sounding breathier than I intended. "You are here to assist me, not to break yourself," he said, his gaze dropping to my mouth for a fraction of a heartbeat, before he turned and carried the canisters back to the lab as if they weighed nothing at all. That night, the lab felt smaller. Every time he moved past my desk, the scent of cedar and wood smoke enveloped me. And every time he spoke, I felt the phantom touch of his breath on my skin. He was beginning to notice me too. I could feel his gaze on the back of my neck while I wrote. And I would look up to find him watching me from across the room, his expression unreadable, his hands momentarily still. On the 7th night, the tension finally reached a breaking point. "The titration is delicate," he said, his voice unusually tight. "I need you to hold the cooling rod. Do not let it move more than a hair's breadth, or the solution will crystallize." I stepped up to the workbench, my heart already hammering a frantic rhythm. He stood directly behind me, so close I could feel the radiant heat of his proximity, if not his body. He reached around me, his large, scarred hands covering mine on the handle of the rod. The contact was overwhelming. The back of my head was inches from his chin. I could hear the slow, rhythmic hiss of his breath. His arms were like pillars of iron on either side of me, pinning me to the bench without ever truly touching me anywhere else. "Steady," he whispered. But I wasn't steady. My hands were trembling, the copper rod vibrating against the glass. I can't. I breathed. The heat of the furnace and the heat of him making my head swim. Viktor didn't let go. Instead, he leaned in, his chest finally brushing against my shoulders. And he squeezed my hands, his fingers rough and calloused, forcing my grip to hold true. "You can," he rasped, his lips so close to my ear that I felt the ghost of a touch Focus on the metal, Mina. Focus on the weight of my hands. Nothing else exists in this room but the reaction.
I closed my eyes,
Trying to do as he said, but all I could focus on was the way he smelled, the way he felt, and the way my own body was screaming for him to turn me around and finish the tension that had been building for 7 long, silent nights. When the solution finally turned clear, shimmering blue, he didn't move. We stayed like that for a long, agonizing minute, wrapped in each other's shadows. The only sound the crackle of the fire and our mingled, uneven breaths. Go to bed, Mina, he said suddenly, his voice cracking with a sharp, ragged edge. He stepped back so abruptly I almost stumbled. The moon is nearing its peak. The hunger. It's becoming a distraction. I didn't argue. I fled the room, my skin tingling where he had touched me, knowing that the dead was about to demand a payment I wasn't sure I was ready to give, or was far too eager to offer.